Welcome to Rutzeng's Appraisers on Purpose. In this season, we journey through the realm of technology and connect with valuation and data analysis experts who are at the forefront of industry transformation. We dive deep into how technology is redefining asset analysis, identifying trends, and enhancing professional valuation skill sets. Join us as we meet with leading minds to discuss the revolutionary intersection of technology and traditional processes with our host, real estate investor, entrepreneur, and chief appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back, and I hope it's still a happy new year for you. I am really excited to connect with our guest today, or reconnect, I should say, and I think you're going to be both informed and inspired and more than enlightened, to say the least. This will be part one of ultimately two segments of discussion and conversation. But before we jump into the deep end, got to remind you, it's so important, it's so valuable. Definitely like this on whichever platform you're listening to. Throw in some comments as well. That always helps spark other people to share what they've gathered, what they've learned, what they're taking away. And in addition to that, be generous. Who's one other person you could share this with? With that, I am so excited to welcome Marc Rutzen with us today. Marc, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Man, I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. And we'll get into a bit of the background and stuff as well. But, everybody wants to know, Marc, were you born this way, or how did your life come to intersect this whole space of real estate and data and actually some valuation as well?
Yeah, I actually started in real estate development in 2011. Great year for real estate development.
Fantastic year for development.
Crazy game. I started off doing subsidized deals. So I graduated from Columbia's MSRED program in 2011.
Oh, got it.
I started off, I was looking for stuff that was subsidized because that was the only stuff actually getting done.
Yes.
And I ended up working with a company called Three Corners that did development in Chicago and surrounding areas. So I did master planned community development in Moline. I did a federally qualified health center, a few neighborhood stabilization program deals. And, it was great experience. And I kind of moved from there to brokerage and consulting and saw that side. So the people analyzing the developments for developers. And in every position I had, every way I looked at it, the industry was just kind of inefficient. Like everything was very manual. People weren't analyzing data in an objective way. It was always very like, oh, I think this is right, so let me get the data to prove this is right. That was kind of the approach for the analysis. And I thought, man, there has to be a more objective, automated way to do this. And so that led me to found my first startup in Noto in 2016.
That's amazing. So when you mentioned your master's, and I think that's something a lot of people in the valuation profession have kind of thought about, not necessarily taken action on. What types of exposure to data and use of analysis and use of that came through your master's degree there?
It was not. So it's more focused today on data and using data science in real estate. At the time, it was not so much. I think everyone was concerned about, number one, finding a job because the job market was so bad.
It was terrible. So terrible.
It was very much tailored to getting you into a job or getting you exactly the skills you need to land a job as quickly as possible. Now, like data science has become more prevalent. It's definitely, the program has evolved a bit. I think the leadership is doing a really good job there. But for me, it was more out of necessity. I was like, man, I'm doing this manually. There has to be a faster way to do the job I'm doing right now. So I started learning programming and data science on my own. Not like the best at it. I never got to be the best or wanted to be, but I got enough to do the jobs I needed to do a lot more efficiently. And that's kind of what led into the transition to real estate tech.
Wow, that's fascinating. And then so you get that perspective, you have that sense of like something's wrong here. You get an opportunity to work in the subsidized space. What was, and that's an area that a lot of people are not familiar with. You had access to a significant set of activities and portfolio. What were some of the observations that you took away from that period of time in your career early on?
Determining market rent objectively was
Got it.
extremely difficult to have something you can truly stand behind and feel confident in. And on the development side, I was using, anything I could. I was like, okay, I'll use Rent-A-Meter, I'll use Rent Range, I'll go to property websites and go to Zillow, whatever it may be. I was trying to get data from wherever I possibly could. And I was cobbling it together in Excel and doing my own type of analyses on it. And I just realized, like, that's a lot of work that probably others are doing every time they analyze a deal. And at the end of the day, it gets you closer to a number you feel confident in, but it's not purely objective. You're determining which comps are most comparable. You're using your judgment. And if you're wrong or if you miss something, you could be in a pretty bad way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is totally the case. And then because you had worked with Three Corners, I know the firm quite well. I've known some people who've worked there over the years. They've done some great work. What did you observe around the laborious process for some of those projects getting done, which some people have no access to those or even a reference to what I'm just asking you to comment on?
Yeah, so the neighborhood stabilization program deals was where the bulk of my focus was.
Got it.
Because coming out of school, I found a list. I went very old-fashioned with it. I found a list of 72 registered neighborhood stabilization program developers in Chicago. Physical letters to them. Like, I wrote them myself.
Oh my gosh, a letter. Mark, what is a letter? I mean, do people know what those things really are these days?
Right? If I had to write them today, I probably couldn't, but back in the day. And so, like, I got to learn a lot about the neighborhood stabilization program because I was just networking with these people. They're like, yeah,
sure.
You kid right out of school. Come on, let's talk about the NSPC. What do you want to know? Here's what we're doing. And so what I would do is I would go to one and say, oh, that's so good. I learn all this stuff from them, take good notes. And then I'd say, hey, do you have anyone else I could talk with that would be a good resource? And then they point me to 3 other people.
Oh, okay.
And then to them, I'd be like, hey, I just talked with so-and-so about X, Y, and Z. Did you hear this is going on? Did you hear this is going on? You just keep doing that like round after round, and you get a really good sense of how different programs and markets work, just networking, right? I mean, very real estate based approach. And in doing that, I learned it's a very difficult program to apply, and pro forma your developments get approval on the different funds that you're going to use for the development. It takes a lot of work, but those deals were very good for the neighborhoods and for the developers who worked on them. Especially for us, we actually had a construction side of the business too. So we were doing the construction work and the real estate development.
Wow, that's fascinating. And did you get an opportunity to participate in both groups, or did you focus on one group more than the other?
I did one construction takeoff. It was It was fun, but not something I'd like to do as a profession. I got to be both there and when I moved into CHA, the capital construction program there, I got to be an owner's rep, which was really good experience because I got to actually read plans and say, hey, contractor, this is included. You're not getting a change order for this. And get to argue with the contractors and, really make the deals run efficiently. So it was a good experience all around.
Yes, which is a set of experiences, Mark, that you probably are aware of now. A lot of people don't have, and or they kind of wing it. And it's like, look, the way that you learn this, it's kind of a hard-nosed approach. Like, you literally put your nose down and you just focus and learn. And much like building something we'll talk more about, building models, is you got to just get in, and repetition is the way to get it done.
Absolutely.
Oh man, that is phenomenal. I mean, you were having so much fun, Mark. How could you ever leave such an opportunity like that?
There were the fun and interesting parts where you're getting to learn new things, and there's a lot of in between that is not so fun or interesting. Like, hey, I have to I'm analyzing a TIF deal. Now I have to go to the county website and download data on 90 heads individually. Hey, that's why I started learning about programming and automation, because I'm like, I can't believe this is what I have to do.
Oh my goodness. So I take it the idea of programming and automation, was that something you already had thought about, or was that something you were really exposed to because of your MSRE education?
I really loved technology for
Got it.
forever, really.
Hmm.
I was always fascinated by it. I just, my parents kind of dabbled in real estate a little bit. I knew it was a good path to wealth building, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
real estate's going to be my thing. As I got into it, I'm like, man, I think I can combine interests a little bit here. And
Really?
ultimately, I started learning more and more about programming and data science because I needed it to do my job more effectively. And so that led me to start doing some consulting work because I'm like, hey, other people probably have similar problems. I'm going to start building, I'm going to pitch people on like project management apps and like different like real estate listing apps and different things. I could see if I could get some projects under my belt. And at that time I was approaching it with offshore development, right? Trying to keep it as cost effective as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it actually worked. I got some deals out of it. I ended up getting like 25 grand in contracts from just a few products I pitched. I would just build like a mock-up of the potential mobile app. I'd send it to them and I'd be like, hey, I think this could be really big for your business. It would do X, Y, and Z. You want to have a call about it. And I started to get some actual projects and some experience building these things from that. And ultimately, that led to me teaming up with Lee Kaiser and Susan Jarkson because I was trying to pitch them on a mobile app. And they pitched me on joining their company instead, KIG.
Oh, that's phenomenal. So here you are in more of a kind of support and consulting role. And you know what would be interesting, and I think this is a wonderful tie-in that a lot of people sometimes sidestep and some people bypass and other people really dwell on. But you mentioned you had gotten some connection to real estate through the activities of your family. What were they doing?
Oh, they did a few like fix and flips. I feel like everyone did fix and flips in like the 2001 to 2006 kind of period.
Sure.
But I mean, it worked out. I mean, they made money on some of them. Then the last one they did like 3 of them in a row. And the last one was like 2006 and we were having some trouble with softening market. I was younger at the time. So, I mean, I was in high school. I'm not like paying attention that closely, but I learned some tricks of the trade, how to like do the construction, how, the loans work and everything. And then that kind of, I took that interest with me, went initially to architecture school, the one to work on like developing really cool buildings. I realized like architects don't really get to decide what they're going to build for a long time.
That's true.
Developers do though. And so I kind of made a pivot educationally and went to development.
Oh, that is amazing. And now I'm just curious. Some people have had the opportunity to tell stories about pushing brooms on construction sites or having to run around with their parents, like cleaning up a property before there's a showing. I mean, did you get that type of exposure or was yours more just around the dinner table?
Grunt work. It was the grunt work. Like, demolish that wall. Hey, move all these boards into the house so we could do this work. Okay, fine. I'm the grunt work. I'm a teenager at the time. It was good exercise.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you got to do demolition, I think is what you're telling us.
That was the fun part, yeah. Demo was always the more fun.
That reminds me of one of the very first bigger rehab projects I did. And I remember we started the project and on the first day I realized we were not going to stay on the 30-day schedule. I'm like, oh my goodness. I had no idea a demo would take this much time. I remember calling up friends, and your story just quickly reminds me of that. I remember calling up, John comes to mind and Brent comes to mind, a couple other people. And I'm like, look, I'm going to invite you over. I'll bring all the food. I'll bring all the pizza and beer you need, and I'll have the tools. Yeah. But I know there's probably somebody in your life that really pisses you off. And I want to bring that anger, and I've got something you can take it out on, and you can just demolish this stuff. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. I need your help. I need you to like just tear stuff down. Just like bring all your anger. And it was hilarious because people would come like, this is amazing. And then like an hour later, they're totally exhausted. Like, oh my gosh, this is hard work. I'm like, I know. Yeah. We need more bodies to help demolish stuff.
For sure. Yeah, there's this opportunity there. People, because I've heard of these places where you can like smash glass and TVs and stuff to. It's like
really
cathartic. You can pay for it. I mean, why not do that on real estate? You got 2 businesses, right?
That is definitely the case. That is, oh man, that's good. And so here you are once again. I'm hearing a thread You mentioned about having sent out, how many letters was it?
72.
72 letters. And then here you are again at another point in your career. You're reaching out to people. So I definitely hear that ingenuity, that resourcefulness. And as part of your reaching out in being of service to people, you have other people, in this case, Lee and Susan, turn around and solicit you. They're like, oh, Mark, maybe you should next shift what you're doing. Talk a little bit about how that came together.
Well, so I had put together a little mock-up of like a Kaiser Group app, like what a mobile app would look like. Because my pitch was I'm going to go real custom, very specific real estate technology around your business. I'm going to actually mock it up and send it to people. And at the time, I mean, I had time available. I didn't have kids at that time. So I'm like,
you had a lot more time, man.
I mean, it's kind of hard because it would take like an hour or two to like credit the pitch, but it worked really well. The conversion rate was phenomenal. They're like, yeah, this guy mocked up a whole app for me. At least I'm going to meet with them. And Lee, I had met Lee when I first got out of school and didn't even have a broker license, 2011. And I'm like, yeah, I want to work for you because I definitely want a job and you're doing cool stuff. And so he's like, well, first you need to get your broker license.
I love Lee, man. He's a good guy like that. Like step by step.
He's great.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's so great. And he referred me to a bunch of other people and I met with them. It helped in the networking. But then this was 2015 and I came back. I'm like, hey, Lee, maybe you don't remember me. It was like 4 years ago we talked, but since then I did get my broker license and I also am doing this. I've got this mobile app idea. You know, do you want to meet for 5 minutes and kind of talk through it, see if it's a good fit? And so he's like, yes. And then I go in. At that time, it was still all like physical. Like I went to the office. Yeah. A lot less Zoom calls and that sort of thing.
Oh, no, there wasn't. Zoom was not present a decade ago.
Yeah. So I went in and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I think we could do this and this. And I think it would help with, conversions or get your name out there to more people. And he's like, you like technology and real estate a lot, don't you? And he's like kind of asking me questions about like my background and everything. And then he calls up Susan. He's like, Susan, I think you should meet this guy because we've been looking for someone for this role, this technology or data analytics officer, they called it.
Okay.
And they were looking for someone to be kind of help the KIG as a brokerage be very tech enabled.
Yes.
And I was like, this seems really cool what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
The analytics and the approach you want to use sounds like a really good approach. And I do indeed have a broker license now. So
the power of licensing, I don't care what people say. I mean, it's a powerful barrier to entry and enabler of opportunity.
It's true. And so like I met with Susan, met with Lee, talked with him. And then within a week I had an offer. I'm like, yes, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm going to be an analytics guy.
Yeah. Love it. And so what did it start out as, and then how did that transform over time?
So it started off with a bunch of kind of one-off analyses to like pique people's interest, right? So we looked at like the cost of living, like in terms of martinis in River North versus like the rent growth, and at what point does it become impossible to afford a martini if rents keep going up?
Fascinating relationship.
Little stuff like that I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So that was one of Susan's ideas. And then we did, a couple that were like development and absorption, because there were a lot of new developments going on.
Yes.
2016 where we were 2015 and 16 where we were doing the most work there. And so I did like a lease up projection based on all the new supply coming online and the historical absorption rates, which kind of, is influencing how we're approaching the product now. And, I'll talk to that later, but
sure.
Basically charted out how long would it take to absorb the units that were coming online if everything came online when it was scheduled to and nothing.
Got it. Well, that's a big one, but yes.
It lengthened quite a bit, right? There were some projects that would take 2 years to lease up based on everything that we were modeling. That stuff got a lot of interest. It's just fascinating, right? It's like, oh, that's really cool.
Yes.
People started to want to do more specific analysis. And the main one that just came up over and over again, because it was, again, fascinating, but also informative for their deals, is like, if I were to change X, Y, and Z aspects of this property, what rent could I get? Right.
Yes.
And so I used this platform called Prediction, which was a plugin for Excel, and it did like some simple like regression analyses and neural nets, and pretty simple stuff. And I fed in properties from South Shore and from Hyde Park.
Okay.
Controlling for the variables, I could basically tell you how this property that's in South Shore right now, if you moved it to this point in Hyde Park,
yes,
how much more rent would you get for that exact product?
Oh, wow.
People love that.
Oh, absolutely. Because that supports, I mean, for those people that don't have an investment background, and especially if you work with people that are not familiar with multiple areas, it's that ability to say, if you deploy X amount of money in this area, here's your return. But if you were to shift that over here, here's what your return would be, provided you could secure an asset at a comparable price.
Yeah, it was like you could toggle the square footage or different attributes and see how the rent would adjust. And that became kind of the basis of Enodo, which was meant to isolate all the different drivers of real estate value and tell you what their impact. And so we ended up launching Enodo in May of 2016. So I was at KIG for a little over a year, and then teamed up with Susan and Lee on that.
That's phenomenal. And then first of all, Enodo, is that some friends' initials, or does that it mean something in another language?
In Latin, it means to elucidate, unfold, or untangle, which is what we wanted to do with the complexity of real estate value. Right? Nice concept, but most people ended up saying endo or nodo with the A, or so like it's cool. It's a nice esoteric concept, but in reality, there's a reason everyone chooses a name that's like RE coupled with something in real estate tech.
Oh my gosh, no. But I love the fact that being responsive to the market is what brought Enodo into existence out of your data analytics officer role that you were filling for some forward-thinking commercial brokers who focus primarily on multifamily.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's amazing. So what was maybe the initial or the sole focus of Enodo when it got launched?
So initially, we were trying to objectively quantify all the drivers of value and give you a score for your property. Say, this particular property in this market has like a 90, and that means they're outcompeting everyone or all these properties that are similar, and they're like well positioned with the demographics of the market, the quality of the property. It's like recently renovated, like top of the line. If you're at a lower end of the spectrum, then you have opportunity to do a value add and kind of bring it up and improve your score. Well, we kind of socialized that with people, and there were some barriers to getting a score to be accepted widely, right? Like one being just brokers. I mean, everyone's going to be like, hey, that's like an authority that has been around doing data analysis for decades.
Yeah, but I mean, then again, nobody thought walk score was worth much either when it first came out. I remember when I was first introduced to that, I'm like, I live in a high density area. Like, I get it, but like where I'm from, like this makes no sense. Like, this is not a value. Like, well, yeah, walk scoring going to be very good there.
But it took them a lot of time. Most people don't know this. It actually took 7 years for them to get their patent on walk score.
Yes.
The only reason I know is because I'm like, hey, can we patent Enodo score? How long will it take?
Yeah.
Oh, an ungodly amount of time. So we pivoted a little bit on the strategy and moved toward automating the underwriting process, like automating analysis.
Got it.
So instead of a score that would adjust if you said I'm going to do X, Y, and Z amenity, we actually calculated the dollar amount. Like if you do the granite countertops, the hardwood floor, the dog washing station, whatever crazy amenities were being offered at the time, how much more rent could you actually get? And that really resonated with me.
So your focus on the calculation was more on the end result, is what I hear you saying. And that is how much more, like you said, literally, how much more rent can you get if you make these improvements?
Yeah. And it quickly got into development analysis too, because we're like, oh, well, why don't we just let people create the property on the site if it doesn't already exist? Yeah. Which works well if we didn't have data on the property to fill in. It works well for that. Like we might just not have data on it, but the other case is development sites, and that resonated really well too. got some pretty big developers on the platform. Like we got LMC, so Lennar's multifamily group.
Oh, wow.
I think they're called Cortera now.
Yeah.
We got, what was it? Dinnerstein Companies was on. So we got some pretty big names on because of that functionality to pro forma or basically model the development and see what the rents would look like if I did X, Y, and Z.
Amazing. And so here you are. I mean, a lot of it, we were joking about real estate developers are such an interesting bunch of human beings because some of them are meticulously data driven and others are just like the wildcatters you may have learned about when you took some U.S. history lessons that were going out doing oil exploration. And it's just a matter of feel, for lack of a better word, like this is going to work because I said so. It sounds like, were you working with both camps of clients or did you gear more towards one or the other?
We had some of both. We tended to resonate better with the ones who, wanted to use analytics. But we had some of both. And so the ones who wanted to use it more to prove out their thesis were them and the brokers were kind of why the comp section. So we would serve up rent comps to kind of support the rents we were modeling. And that feature we ended up making very customizable because people are like, well, I agree with some of your rent comps, but I don't agree with others. And I want to add these in that have a much higher rent. So I could say, hey, my rent's going to be much higher. And so the developers that were more like looking and feel like the feel of it, like my gut tells me this is going to work. They were trying to use the data to support, like you would go to an appraiser and be like, hey,
sure,
those rents could be a little bit higher, right?
Come on, really? Are those is that the right data or not?
So they would use it like that. The others would use it to really say, oh, we should or should not go further on this deal.
Yes.
And so that was really helpful. And we tended to have, like I said, more of the analytical group.
Oh, that makes good sense. And then in one sense, it's clear, but at the same time, it's also helpful maybe for people that are less exposed to these type of conversations. What was the initial value proposition that you were bringing to clients?
So the initial was just speed and accuracy, right? So we could serve up your most relevant rent comps. We could tell you if you did X, Y, and Z amenity, how would that comp set change and how would your rents change? And to do that analysis, back in the day, I was doing it. It takes several hours to do. And then you're still kind of guessing, right? Mm-hmm. We would quantify everything and give people data around each different driver of value. And that for them was really helpful. It's more granular insight than you can get with just a human being modeling it in Excel because we're using more sophisticated algorithms.
Yes.
But also automation where you can model a development deal in, a few minutes versus several hours.
I mean, you talk about the ability to significantly transform deal flow when you take hours into minutes. I mean, I got to imagine for people that do any amount of work, this was quite a salivating experience.
Oh yeah. It's the only problem we had, the barrier was people are, they are very used to doing things the way they do. They do their due diligence process the way they craft for a reason because it's led to their success before.
Sure.
So the thing that we initially, we did figure out ways to solve it, but the initial thing was, okay, they're logging into a separate platform to analyze, and then they have to download in Excel, and then they're still going to go call the properties and figure out, where are your concessions, where are your real rents, that sort of thing. We ultimately did an Excel integration to kind of meet it where they were. We did property management software with Yardi, RealPage, Entrata integration to pull in data. But ultimately, there were still some gaps in it that with the tech of the day just wasn't really well suited for. Fortunately, though, AI has come quite a bit since back then. And some of those gaps are things that we're able to tackle today.
That's extremely impressive. And so over the course of time that you were with Enodo, and just obviously you've made reference here, you're onto some new things as well. How did the deliverables change? Or did you continue to improve, or did you add additional services or end results that came from the data integration that you guys were performing? But what was that arc over that several year period?
So We ultimately, we had started with development and value add, right? That was
Yes.
our bread and butter, and that's where we got the most customers. But then we realized that, part of the process of analyzing most deals is you're going to get a rent roll in T12, and you're going to
Yes.
want to put them alongside market data to see, am I, hitting market rents, or am I below market? Am I above market? What's going to happen with this deal? And so we realized, man, we have to do rent roll extraction to really fit into people's workflows.
Yes.
And at the time, it was really interesting. So Red IQ, which was like the best platform for extracting rent rolls,
yes,
the biggest customer base and the most established functionality.
Yes.
I actually knew, or I still know, Elliot Vermees, who was the CEO.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
He had sold it, I guess, to Berkadia.
Oh, we didn't know that.
2017,
okay,
or thereabouts. And
yep.
So the lenders, we were talking to these lenders every day who were starting to see our platform and be like, oh, these guys have some good analytics. They were like, we're not going to use a platform if, it's owned by a competitor, right? Even though lenders deal with a tremendous amount of rent rolls and operating statements, they're not going to give data for fear of deal flow being taken from them to another lender. I'm like, I get that. Okay, wait, here's an opportunity. Let's parse rent rolls in T12s and add that, because our users on the acquisition side and the development side want it too. And the lenders, I think there's a huge opportunity there. Turned out to be the right call, because ultimately we added that. We added the T12 extraction. We were very, very good at rent rolls, and had a really good approach to it using machine learning. Ultimately, that led to the acquisition by Walker & Dunlop in 2019. Because we added that function. They could care less about the value add modeling, right? Like,
yes,
what they care about is, I'm going to receive 3 rent rolls over the course of underwriting this deal. And
yes,
for the rest of the time I'm servicing that loan, every year I'm going to receive rent rolls every quarter. And I have to process them manually. It takes a little over an hour for a complex rent roll. And they're going to have to do every single one of those manually. They needed a better solution. And we just offered it at exactly the right time to kind of become part of that market.
That makes a ton of sense. And one thing you touched on in there, Mark, which a lot of people obviously in the technology communities were familiar with, they're like, yeah, of course. But other people may not have really captured. And you made it a quick reference to machine learning. Could you share just a little bit more what that is? Because I know a number of people who listen to this podcast are continuing to consider ways that, like, I know that there's opportunity out there, and I don't really know what it is or how to go find it, or maybe what I could start reading about. Tell us a little bit about machine learning.
Yeah, so most people in real estate have some exposure to the concept of regression, right?
Yes.
Analysis in Excel. Like, that's where most people dabble in. Maybe they only do it in stats in college, right? And then they don't have much occasion to do it again. Appraisers actually continue to do it, but it's, based on a limited amount of data. You're talking like what can fit in a few rows in Excel. You're not talking like millions and millions of data points. So what we were doing with it, the way machine learning works is, if you feed enough data into it, you have like what the correct result is. And on one side, it's the inputs. These are the variables we want to track. It's like median income, median home values, the rent levels, the educational attainment, whatever it may be. The output is, okay, we want to figure out what the rent should be, or we want to figure out the potential of this market to support development.
Yes.
Okay, so you train a model where input these variables, output is this, and we know that this is the output. The machine basically comes up, or the model comes up with different weights for each variable. And sometimes, like using a neural net, it can be pretty many layers deep. It's basically saying, here's the first layer of relationships between the variables. Then there's another layer of relationships. Then there's another layer. It's linking these things together and understanding that when this is present, this weight of this other variable is different. When this attribute's present, this is the type of model to use, right? So it can get really complex, but at the end of the day, it's as simple as you're putting in training data and you're getting out an output. And the extent to which the model produces the correct output is your accuracy. So we would use it to model rents, because we knew what the rent was. what all the amenities and attributes of the property and the market were. And so we trained a model that says, hey, based on these attributes being present, this is what your rent should be. Based on these attributes being present, this is what your rent should be. And that's one application of it, but there are many. It's used in every different field at this point.
I think that's a wonderful perspective that a lot of people miss because they're asked to analyze in-place rents. I mean, I'm sure you guys dealt with this a ton. And then they're asked to offer their perspective on, is this rent roll legit, above market or below market? And so many times, not throwing anyone under the bus, although we're happy to beat them with a bat. They put a rent roll forward and they're like, oh yeah, this is what the rent roll should be. You're like, in what universe? And in this case, you had built a model that actually said, this is validated outputs that you could bank on, essentially, as opposed to hope that the broker isn't totally trying to snowball you just to get a good deal for a seller.
That was basically it. We were trying to get to an objective, proven measure of what the rent should be, what the value of the property should be.
Are you running a real estate firm? Are you looking to grow your firm, streamline your operations, or prepare for an exit? Don't miss this opportunity to work with Michael to figure out your business pathway to massive success. With a growth system for business that leverages opportunities and removes obstacles that Michael has successfully taught to thousands of entrepreneurs globally. Michael's guidance will help turn aspirations into reality. Michael is a renowned figure in the real estate and business coaching worlds. As one of only 5 individuals worldwide for Entrepreneurs Organization, Michael serves a dual role, training business owner participants in the EO Accelerator program, while also upskilling EO members' impact and capacity to lead multi-million-dollar businesses. Get more out of your business. In working with Michael, you can achieve the growth, profitability, and life balance you desire. With Michael, it's not just about business growth. It's about redefining your purpose for business and for your life. If you are interested in working with Michael, contact him via his LinkedIn profile or email him at michaelh@paru.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode, where we explore new technology trends that will shape the world of real estate appraisal for years to come.
Yeah. And especially in the value add space. I mean, that's one that's always the case. Someone's looking at saying, okay, maybe the property's been through its first round of reno, and now we're interested in picking it up. How much more can we actually drive rent, increase our return on invested capital over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Maybe we do some cost saving there. We do some other things to balance out the cash flow to maximize returns to investors. But ultimately, can we actually achieve that? And most of the time in the gunslinging world, it's like, yeah, I think so because I've done it before. In this case, it's yes, because Marc and the data team at Enodo actually proves it out given market extracted data.
Yeah, that was, I had, so when I did my feasibility development market analysis work back in the day, always just, even whether I was on the development side or the consulting side, it felt so subjective at the end.
Yeah.
Right. Like consultants will use a range. They'll say rents could be from like 2,200 to 2,700. Okay. Well, that doesn't really help me because all my profits within that range. So yeah, I felt like there had to be a more objective scientific way. And that's what we sought to build with.
Sure. No, Marc, that is absolutely fantastic. And as you touched on, and I don't think you used the word, but it's what came to mind, is the swag method of coming to a result, the scientific wild ass guess. You're like, well, this is so much better than anything else. And I'm like, okay, sure. Are you putting money into this or are you just collecting a fee? Let's be really clear. Like you're putting money into it. Maybe your swag has a little more credibility. But if you're just collecting a fee and moving on and you got no real stake in the outcome, might be a little light.
Well, the goal is to not have them come back with an issue, right? So you caveat everything as much as possible. This rent could be achieved within this range if these conditions are met. You're basically throwing so many caveats on it that it's like, at the end of the day, is it achievable? I don't know. What did I just bring you to produce?
Oh my goodness. So you mentioned that Enodo did get sold or acquired, if you will, by Walker and Dunlap.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Not everyone's had the opportunity to go through an acquisition, and you were a founder as part of this. So
Yeah.
you had a, as they say, a pole position seat.
Yeah, it was interesting. So we were not really looking for an exit in these conversations.
Mhm.
You know, Susan and Lee, they had their brokerage company that they were still running.
Yes.
So they didn't have a lot of time to devote to Enodo. Like it couldn't be completely full time for them.
Yes.
They were always available, but I mean, they had two other full time jobs. So you know, they were like, well, we're not opposed to an exit if someone comes along, and
Sure.
so a couple did, and you know, some of them were like, okay, that's way too low, that doesn't make sense.
Sure.
And then the conversation with Walker was very interesting because we were talking about raising another round.
Yes.
And we were also negotiating a pilot deal with them to
Okay.
software. And so they're like, well, we might be interested in investing. I'm like, oh, okay. So we're talking about, you know, what the amount would be, like, what do you want to come in or not? And ultimately, you know, after like weeks of conversation back and forth, we were going to have a call where we actually discuss the terms of them being like an investor in our round and see if they're actually going to do it or not. And then they said, you know, we've invested in other companies before, and we didn't necessarily get the operational benefits that we wanted to achieve.
Sure.
Why don't we just buy you guys? And they threw out a number. I'm like, okay, I think we can make that work.
You know what? I think I could afford to eat for a few weeks. I could definitely put a little money away for savings, maybe some education for the kids. I'm like, who knows? This suddenly sounds a little more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was 30 at the time, so I'm like,
oh yeah,
wait a second. I've been, you know, I started working at 23, and I'm about to sell a startup at 30. That felt really good.
Oh, absolutely.
My first exit under my belt, that'd be awesome. So, I mean,
notch that belt.
We ended up striking a deal that worked out really well. So the team came over and then was kind of like core part of the development team for the applications. We continued building out the internal. Now Enodo became an internal tool. We pushed the rent roll extraction and T12 extraction further. Ended up being really good experience. And I ultimately, you know, rose up to chief product officer there, built out a team like much larger. It was a lot that we got to work on. It's just like, I love the startup world. So at a certain point, I wanted to get back in it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately why we went to Hello Data.
Totally makes sense. I mean, and just kind of touching on your experience now, you've lived through going from working at other firms, being an analyst, being a consultant, being a founder, now being a founder who's been acquired. So you're working in still an entrepreneurial. Willie's got a great company. I mean, it's very entrepreneurial, but nonetheless, it's still a corporate environment. I mean, it's grown massively. So there's just so many more people there. And as you point out, now you're internal to a company like that, and you were there for a period of time. What was that experience like? Because a lot of people don't know that. Many of have only been in some form of independent contractor type of position or working only on a small team, as opposed to now you've got a lot of resources, but you also have different reporting structures.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that, you know, for my group, we didn't have like a ton of reporting to do. Aaron, who was the CTO at the time, you know, was really, he wanted to kind of insulate us to keep doing our innovation and building new tech that like served the business without having to do like a ton of quarterly reporting or crazy stuff.
Yes.
So it was nice because it was kind of an island of innovation within a larger publicly traded company. You get the upside of being able to experiment and rapidly iterate, and not the downside of potentially running out of runway tomorrow, right?
Yes.
So it was great. And, you know, for 3-ish years, it kind of stayed smaller, and we grew the team, but we didn't grow it like tremendously. And then, you know, it started to get a lot bigger because they did a lot of acquisitions in like 2020, 2021. And then they started to put more of the reporting stuff in place. And I was like, oh, I'll reluctantly do this. Fine. I mean, I'm not the type to want to do the reporting.
You're not that guy.
Build the thing that provides a benefit, not telling you how I built the thing that provides the benefit.
Totally get it. One interesting thing you mentioned about the opportunity to continue to build out the rent roll and T12 extraction. How did you gain perspective because of the multiple business units that were relying upon the software and the modeling that you had constructed?
Yeah, the nuances between different deal types that I had not gotten to really dig into before, we really dug into, like student housing versus multifamily, traditional multifamily. We did HUD deals, right? It was very complex, right? We built a platform that was the internal deal management platform.
Yes.
That initially was teed up for HUD deals because of the complexity. They take 6 months to close, and there's so many different documents that have to be submitted. It was being done manually with checklists. That's kind of hard to manage, right? That's a lot. And at the time, DealPath, which I think is becoming the leader in the deal management space, or is close to the top. They weren't like that prevalent at the time.
Sure.
There were a few others like Pro Deal that we had looked at, but they didn't have all of the stuff that the HUD team really wanted. And so we ended up building a custom solution because it could integrate with, the integrations were a big thing, right? Like when you're building internal stuff, you have to make sure it talks well with your Salesforce. It talks well with your Power BI. It talks well with the data warehouse. And so there were a lot of different integrations that I probably would not have been exposed to on the startup side at any point, because it would be handled by internal teams or consultants. Okay. I got to actually dig into the weeds and see how some of that stuff worked.
Well, fascinating. Yeah, we've heard some similar stories, completely different in their experience, but the core of it is I got to see, experience, or learn about different, as you talked about, integrations, about different market segments, about different needs, and how taking a step back, something may be able to be expanded or improved to have much greater use, a larger use case than maybe the more narrowly defined original approach. So that's fascinating. So here you are, you get all this exposure while you're at Walker and Dunlap, but as things changed and they grew, I sensed that you wanted to get back to what you were originally more content with, which was technology, startup, that kind of thing. So what happened?
Well, I'm kind of a 0 to 1 guy, right? Like there's people that take it from 1 to wherever it needs to go, and there's the people that take it from nothing to something.
Yes.
I like to focus on that nothing to something. Yeah, I like team size to be like 25 is kind of my upper level of team size where, I feel like, okay, I could manage this and I don't need like a huge supporting structure or anything like that. So when it started to get bigger, I'm like, it doesn't have that startup feel that I really like. So ultimately, I wanted to get, I was kind of thinking about like, okay, what's the next step in my career? Like, what am I going to do from here? And I expressed to leadership that I was like, man, I know everything's running well and we built all this great stuff, but I feel like I'm not learning as much as I want to be learning. I want to kind of push the envelope and get exposure to different facets of the industry. Because learning is the most important thing. Like if you're always absorbing new information and, trying to push the envelope, don't just settle with what you know, like keep expanding.
Yes.
I felt like I wasn't learning as much. So I expressed this, and then ultimately that led to me, they had made an investment in Fortress property management software.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Carrie Davis. I don't know if you met her, but
no.
Great product. Really interesting approach, how they're going about it, trying to take on the biggest players in property management or the property management software space. I ultimately went there for 6-7 months ish. At the end of 2022, I kind of joined them to of all things, Chief Marketing Officer was my position because it was the only position available.
Oh, I get it.
So I'd expressed, I was doing research on like SEO and inbound marketing, content development, because it was just interesting to me. I guess I talked about it enough times that they're like, oh, this might be a good fit. I'm like, that's probably not the right title for me. And I'm going to be bad at all the other stuff of marketing, but I'll focus on SEO and content generation. And so I went over, I ended up setting up their HubSpot CRM, migrated all the contacts over, developed like a scoring system for
Nice.
leads so they can prioritize, built out, some systems to help process the onboarding of new deals, mostly Excel-based stuff with some scripting. And then, built out their whole inbound lead campaign, like the whole system to like track a lead from the time they see an ad to landing on our landing page to interacting to drip campaigns. It was cool to set up, but then I'm like okay, I'm really not a marketing guy. This is probably not the best thing for me at the end of the day. So we kind of talked about some different stuff I could work on there. Ultimately, though, I saw what Tim and Nico were my first 2 hires at Enodo back in the day. I saw what they were doing with Hello Data and really wanted to join them. And so I did in May of this year. Jump back into startup.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And so what did your first 2 hires, what had they gone on and done? They too had obviously left Enodo. And how had they either gone back into the startup world or gone and found something new or built upon what they'd already had learned about? Well,
so I know Nico, he left first, and he really like more than me even is about like continually learning and pushing the envelope and trying new approaches in data science, because that's his thing. He's a computer scientist and a data scientist. So he wants to try new approaches, new techniques, and he wasn't getting the full opportunity to do that because commercial real estate is commercial real estate. You can push the envelope in some ways, but not every way, right? And he kept justifying a large company like, hey, just mess around with this and maybe nothing happens from it. Work on it for a quarter, So he had left because he wanted to experiment with different approaches, different data science libraries, and I didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but I was like, man, I'm going to help you any way I can. I made some referrals. I'm like, this guy's a great data scientist. If you're looking for a data scientist, hire this guy. So he ended up getting a bunch of contracting deals just because I was like, hey, work with this guy. He's phenomenal. I sent some leads his way and it worked out. So he had enough like consulting income to do the experimentation with half his time and the consulting with the other half.
Wow, I love it.
And for Tim, he left later. It was more toward the end of 2022. He already had like some consulting lined up that he was going to do while he kind of experimented and saw, what he could make into a scalable business too.
Yes. And
he ended up joining forces with Nico because he's like, hey, we love working together. We've worked together for years. Why not, build something together? Yes. And I'm watching. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool what you guys are starting to do here. And I kept in touch with them and ultimately ended up working with them a little bit on like the revenue management system for Fortress because they were doing consulting. I'm like, hey, these guys are perfect for this.
Yep.
And then in doing that, it kind of pushed me over the edge. I'm like, okay, I really like what you guys are doing.
I feel it. I feel that I should be there and not here.
I'm like, man, I had the golden handcuffs for a while. I had to exit. I'm like, my savings is strong. I'm in a good spot.
Got it.
Let's do this thing again. Let's go for it.
Yep. I love that. And so when you say let's go for it, what is it that you all decided to go for?
Well, initially, we had 6 APIs that did different functions.
Got it.
And one was real estate listing descriptions, which ended up not being a viable business at all. Because it's too easy to replicate. There were like 9,000 other groups that, as soon as ChatGPT became popular, 9,000 other listing description generators.
Got it.
That one died off. There was floorplans.ai that was floor plan extraction, which I mentioned before. We were talking before the call.
Yeah,
we've had that algorithm for a while.
Yes,
but that market, mostly for floor plan extraction, like the market was contractors who are trying to do takeoffs.
Yes.
Definitely did not want to do a takeoff construction estimating software of any kind. Like, no thanks. I'm not going to sell the contractors who are super old school and we'll be like, I'm going to do it manually anyway. So we didn't pursue that as much. We still have an algorithm, but we didn't pursue it. And then they started to eliminate, like process of elimination. We tested the different markets for the 6 APIs. And ultimately we wound up with, it's still a pretty big problem to figure out what market rent should be.
Oh,
right? It's a massive problem. And like in the time I was at Walker & Dunlop, I had some companies try to pitch me. It was nice to be on the other side, like being
Sure.
on, buy our data, buy our product. I didn't see any that were like so good that I thought, oh, this problem is really solved. These guys got it.
Yes.
And that was 4 years, right? Where I didn't see anything that really solved the problem. So we combined a few of the APIs. We took the quality score, which was image extraction. We could basically tell from a photo of a real estate listing or from an appraisal, what are the amenities that are present and what is the condition and quality of that asset? Not the photo quality, but the underlying asset itself.
Sure.
That became really powerful because we coupled it with our rent source product, which was daily updates on market data from several different listing sites. So we could then combine quality score, which said, hey, this is a 8 out of 10 in terms of quality.
Yes.
With the daily rent updates and then start to build that correlation. Like what's the correlation between quality and rent? What's the correlation between attributes and rent? Similar to what we did at Enodo in some ways.
Yes.
But much more advanced now because AI has come so far. We couldn't do the visual analysis before.
Oh,
we couldn't do text analysis before.
Yes.
So we basically took that listing description generator, reversed it, and read the listing descriptions to see what was present. What are the attributes? Like, what is this property about? And that led us ultimately to a really powerful comps algorithm to source rent comps in any market. And then that ultimately became the foundation for Hello Data, which is rent comps and revenue management. Those are our two main focus areas. We want to get you the most accurate rent comps and the right pricing based on everything that's going on in your market in real time.
That's fascinating. And so, Marc, something that's near and dear to my heart, having been a real estate investor now for, nearly 30 years. I couldn't say more how much I completely agree with the work that you're doing. Is what you all are offering available in the marketplace, or are you guys mostly in stealth mode? Because there's people listening who might be a little more entrepreneurial in their thinking, saying, wow, if you're doing this level of analysis, this could be a supplement to what I'm doing or what clients reach out to me to do. But you're doing it at scale and I'm not. Talk to us about that, because maybe there's an extra opportunity here.
Yeah, it is. It's been released since June of this year. So it's completely nationwide. Any market, you just put in a property address or property name, and it will pull up the information on your asset, and then it will source your 10 most relevant rent comps. You could add or remove pretty easily. Yep. And then from there, you just generate the report. It's going to tell you these are the recommended rents. Here's the why behind it. So what we do that's really unique is, since we're analyzing every day millions and millions of listings, we go to property websites and listing sites to get this data as the listings hit the market down to the unit level. So we see every unit when it first is available, how that price changes over time, and where it closes, where it's released to the market. Now that price ends up being very, very close to what's on the rent roll. A lot of times it's exactly what's on the rent roll. So we have built a system that's basically telling you what your competitors, where they're closing their units. The thing that floors me in multifamily, and not to get too much on a soapbox here, but in single family, if I would list my house and say, hey, I think it's $1 million. I'm just going to list it for sale by owner. No appraiser, broker, investor in their right mind would just say, oh, that was the market value. He thinks it. I mean, I've got some background in real estate, but just some guy, right? So some guy lists his house. It's $1 million. No one would look at that and say, yeah, it's $1 million for sure. But in multifamily, how do we research market rents? Go to the property website, go to the listing site. What is the rent? It changes every day.
Yes.
We're seeing what they're asking, not where they closed. So what we developed is a way to find where they closed. And from that, deduct the value of concessions. Like I mentioned, the tax extraction. We could see potentials were posted to their property website at the time this unit was removed.
Totally.
Ultimately, that gets us to effective rents, which gets us to the pricing model.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that is such a powerful, powerful tool. It is absolutely amazing. And so, Marc, given everything, and as I mentioned to everyone, this is a 2-part opportunity with Marc. First one is always our kind of wonderful approach, like how did you get to where you're at now? The second one's going to be a much deeper dive on Hello Data and how to utilize and extract information in a meaningful way that serves people, which Hello Data is doing a phenomenal job of. But Ryan, as we think about tying in all these pieces, Marc, given what you've seen and what you're dealing with now and what you're looking forward to, what are you most excited about over the next 3 to 5 years?
So the big one that is a problem I've been trying to solve since I was doing development deals myself is modeling where you should develop and what you should develop. Based on data, right? And I'm super excited about it because it's something I tried to do empirically and just could not do. You can't do it in Excel. There's not enough data analysis capability. So what we're very close to now, we recently built an approach where we can say, based on this property's attributes, this hypothetical property on this piece of land, it's going to be 300 units. It's going to be, super high quality, brand new construction, 3 stories, whatever it may be. You put in these attributes, it'll tell you these are the unit types that are most prevalent in the market. Here's how long they stay on the market, and here are their average rents. Basically recommending a unit mix for you.
Got it.
And then it will say these amenities are most common in the market, and you want to use these in your development. What we want to do is take that to a model that is basically saying these are the unit types being absorbed most readily, right?
Yes.
When this 2-bed, 2-bath that's exactly 1,200 square feet and this layout hits the market, it goes like that. It's just gone, right?
Exactly.
Every single time. So if you're going to develop that 2-bed, 1,200 square foot unit with these amenities and these attributes. So that's one side of the equation is once I have a piece of land, solve that empirically, like what should I develop?
Got it.
The other part is where should I develop? And for that, our approach is pretty unique. It's just like we do rent comps.
Yes.
We can say these are the attributes of this property and its market, and these are the attributes of these other properties in their markets. What are the attributes that make a development successful? Like if you were to say these 100 developments are deals we've done in the past that have knocked it out of the park. Okay, where can I find markets that are similar in terms of demographics, supply characteristics to where you were most successful before? Okay, that's where you should buy. That's where you should look for land. And then we'll help you model what you should build on it. I'm super excited about it.
That's phenomenal. Man, I am so excited for part 2 of this, Marc. I was excited for part 1, but I'm even more excited for part 2 because, I do a good bit of that as well. And I do it good old pen and paper approach, which is slow and not always as accurate as I like. And therefore tend to be a bit more methodical and even, I would say conservative because, there's that plus or minus factor. And by modeling this out, identifying the attributes, verifying the attributes, and then testing the attributes, you reduce that variance factor.
That is what we're trying to do. I want to eliminate my first job completely.
Love it, man. That's phenomenal, man. Eliminate the first job completely, like so many other things are going on. Well, friends, as I said, this is only the first of 2 wonderful segments we're going to have with Marc. I am so excited. As I mentioned to you, not only have you liked the podcast by now, and you have even added a comment or 2 of what you've learned from some of the things that Marc has shared through his trajectory and how the work that he's done, starting out in real estate and then development, being around some property management, then getting into data, of course, creating models, all of which can drive decisions that impact valuation. So many wonderful things here. Who are 1 or 2 people that come to mind? You're like, I totally need to share this with them. Make sure to do that now. Marc, thank you so much for joining us for this segment of Perusing the Power Values podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, buddy. All right. Until our next time.
Thank you for joining us in uncovering how technology is reshaping the landscape of real estate valuation and appraisal. Would you do a favor for someone you may never meet to influence a future that is worth building? Please scroll down and like this podcast and share your comments. Stay engaged with us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platforms to catch every moment of innovation and expertise shared. Got an idea or a suggestion? Share your thoughts and questions with us. Let's continue to grow together, embracing the tech evolution that is enhancing our industry's effectiveness and efficiency. Until next time, remember, in the fast-evolving world of real estate and technology, being a part of the change is what sets you apart. Keep creating the future by striving for excellence and innovation.